Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. We are going to start with a few opening prayers. There is a link in the description of the video to the document with opening prayers. So just open that up. And we're going to chant these in Tibetan, but if you're not used to chanting in Tibetan, you can go ahead and read along in English. That's one of the benefits of watching this remotely, is we don't all have to chant together. So we'll just do the first one 3 times, and then the next ones we'll do 1 time each. Om Organ Yogi Nom Jan Sam Pemage Sadom Pola Yatsen Chogi Ngorupne Pemajung Ne Jesurak Hordu Kandro Mangpo Kor Ketki Jesudak Druki Jinji Lopchi Ashek Suso Guru Pema City Home Organ Yogi Num Jan Sam Pemage Sadom Pola Yatsen Chogi Ngorupne Pemajung Ne Jesurak Kordu Kandro Mangpo Kor Ketki Jesudak Druki Jinji Lopchi Ashek Suso Guru Pema City Home Organ Yogi Nom Jan Sam Pemage Sadom Pola Yatsen Chogi Ngorupne Pemajung Ne Jesurak Kordu Kandro Mangpo Kor Ketki Jesudak Druki Jinji Lopchi Ashek Suso Guru Pema City Home. Continuing on. Kunzando sem garab shiri sing pema kara jepa nishunga soso nimna tatan katsa so kate lama namla so vadem. Ogmen chuki inki podrana dusum sange kungi ngowonit rangsem choko ngonsun sumton rangsem choko ngonsun tonse pe tawe lama namla so vadem. Sashi pochu chu ching me do tram rab ning jini de gempadi sange zing du mikte polwai droku namda jing la cho pashok tram guru ratna mandala putta mega samudra saparana samae ahom. Samchen namki sampadang lo ye je cha chitawar che chon tomo te pai choki korlo kordu so. Okay. So let's just take a moment to connect with our compassionate intention for attending this class today. We are here to learn how to be more compassionate for the benefit of all sentient beings. So let's just take a moment to reflect on that. And we are going to start with a meditation today. So meditation is the state of mind when it is relaxed, stable, and open. When our mind is calm and settled, there is a spaciousness that allows time between action and reaction. But our minds are rarely spacious and open like that. Usually our minds are just running wild like monkeys. And when our mind is too agitated like that, and it's wound up and out of control, the mind controls you rather than the other way around. The point of meditation is to create space in your mind. Our minds are like muscles. And so in the same way that we work out to keep our bodies strong, the mind needs to be trained to be calm and relaxed, yet also alert and wakeful. Creating space in the mind also helps us to balance our emotions. So normally, our minds are so busy and distracted all the time, and when our emotions come up, they carry us away. And when any random thought comes up about the past or the future, or a hope that we have, or a fear that we have, we're carried away with it. If we want to generate bodhicitta, the awakened mind of wisdom and compassion, the first thing we have to do is calm our minds. And that creates the space for compassion and wisdom to arise and for us to stabilize in that state of wisdom and compassion. So let's get into meditation posture. You can sit comfortably with your back straight. It's okay to sit in a chair or on the floor, but it's important to sit with a straight back. And place your hands in your lap, just gently relaxed. If you want, the traditional posture is you put your right hand over your left hand with the thumbs touching, and you place your hands in that position just below your navel. So your thumbs are just below your belly button. You can also just place your hands on your knees, however works for you. And in our tradition, we meditate with our eyes slightly open. So we're not going to close our eyes. We're not trying to shut out the world. We are just focusing on our breath in the midst of the world, in the midst of our experience. So it's okay if there are sounds or sights in your experience. If there's stuff around you, if you're not in a perfectly silent room, that's okay. It's okay that there's sights and sounds. It's okay that there's thoughts in your head. Those things are there and they're going to try and distract you. But no matter what comes up or no matter what enters into our experience, we're going to remain focused on our breath. If we get distracted from our breath, we're going to come back to our breath. So our eyes are slightly open. You can just kind of follow the line of your nose to find a spot somewhere in the space in front of you to gaze at. Just gently rest your eyes there. If you start finding yourself getting sleepy, you can raise your gaze a bit. And if you find yourself being overly distracted and agitated, you can lower your gaze a bit. So the lower your gaze, the more kind of calm it's going to be. And then if you raise your gaze a little bit, you'll have a little bit more energy and help you stay awake. And then now you're sitting up straight, you're relaxed, your eyes are slightly open, looking down, and then just place the tip of your tongue gently behind your teeth. Just like the spot right behind your teeth. Just touch your tongue there gently. Your mouth is slightly open. And then just relax. And you can take a deep breath if you need to relax. Roll your shoulders if you need to. Once we start meditating, you're going to be sitting very still. So do what you need to do now to get comfortable. When you come to that natural rhythm of breath, just bring your mind to gently focus on that. You're not grasping onto your breath, but just putting a very light attention on your breathing. Don't try to control it at all. Just breathe naturally and put the most gossamer thin attention on your breath. It's like taking your pulse. You don't put any pressure on it, just observe it. Your attention is like a feather, gently riding on the surface of your breath. When thoughts come and try to distract you, just let it be. Just drop it and come back to your breath. Your meditation is not lost by hearing your thoughts, but by following them down the road. So when you notice yourself following a thought, just drop it. If you want to visualize like spaghetti tongs, picking up the thought and dropping it, if that's helpful, you can do that. Or if you want to visualize like scissors, cutting them and throwing them away, you can do that. Or you might not need those visualization techniques and you can just, notice that a thought has caught your attention, just drop it. Don't look at it. Doesn't matter if it's a good thought or a bad thought. It's just a thought. Drop it and return to that gossamer thin attention on the surface of your breath. We just return again and again to that gossamer thin attention on the surface of our breath. Just meditate for a few minutes. Okay, so now that our minds are a little bit more stable, maybe that will help us pay attention. So this is a meditation you can do anytime. It's a really wonderful meditation. If that was only 5 minutes, which I think is a pretty reasonable amount of time if you're new to meditation, but for some people that will even be a very long period of time. So you can do that meditation for even just 1 minute whenever you need to do it. Just find some times in your day to just stop and meditate for just 1 minute or just 5 minutes or just 10 minutes, and work your way up to meditating for longer periods of time. And that meditation really is so important for creating a stable foundation for any other spiritual practice that you engage in. So today I want to talk about kindness and about self-honesty. Jetsama Akon Lamo says, in the Mahayana vehicle, the Buddha taught that we should be more concerned for the welfare of sentient beings than we should be for our own welfare. I think many people can get behind this idea. I think it's the general premise behind most religions, I think, is to care for others as much as or more than yourself. And we may think that we already do this. We may really think that we do think of others all day long. But if we examine ourselves carefully, we will find that this is actually not a natural way for us to behave. Which is probably why so many wonderful spiritual people over the years have created religions that tell you to be kind to others, because we don't tend to do it on our own without working on it. It's just not our habit. Our primary concern has always been the survival of self, of our ego. In fact, our habitual tendency to preserve the ego is so natural to us, so deeply ingrained, that we don't notice how often we engage in it. You might disagree with this. You might be thinking, well, I'm a very kind person. Today I was kind to my family, and yesterday I brought some cookies to my neighbor. And this past week I was really generous and gave money to a good cause. And Jetsama says that if we think like that, think again. She says, the only way that you can remember when you were kind is by comparison to other times. This means that there has to be a hefty measure of time when you were not kind to be able to compare the two. If we were truly bodhisattvas, here solely to benefit sentient beings, the activity of kindness would be so all-pervasive and natural, we wouldn't be able to discriminate it. One would not know that one was kind. If someone were to say to you, you're really kind, your whole life is kindness, one would say, really? Because one wouldn't know. There would be nothing to compare it to. So Jetsama is a perfect example of this. I've actually seen this interaction happen multiple times where someone has said to her, you're so kind, or you're so generous, you're so compassionate. And she goes, really? There's so many beings out there that need more. I can't, there's so many needs to be met. There's so many beings out there that are suffering. Like she doesn't even pause on the compliment for a second, but she just, she doesn't see herself as being kind. She just sees the needs of beings that are yet to be met. There's still these needs to be met. Why couldn't I do more? It's not enough. I should still do more. Most of us were pretty easily contented with the amount of kindness that we have and that we exhibit in our lives. But if we examine ourselves, we'll see that it's not our habit to be kind. We rarely empathize with the needs of others. We may be intellectually aware of the needs of others, but there's a vast difference between an intellectual understanding of suffering and actually empathizing with the needs and hopes and fears of other beings. Jetsama says, we rarely enrich our own life experience by really merging, really blending, really empathizing with the conditions of other people's minds. And the way she phrases that really struck me. We rarely enrich our own life experiences because we rarely even consider that it would enrich our life experience to deeply empathize with others. When we talk about empathizing with the conditions of other people's minds, we're not just talking about their surface level momentary experience, like their recent breakup or the birth of their child or the death of a parent or a recent promotion. Absolutely, we should empathize with their grief and their joy, but this is surface level momentary stuff. From the Buddhist perspective, when we talk about empathizing with the conditions of other people's minds, we are talking about the big picture. We are talking about empathizing with their current experience in the context of cyclic existence, with the understanding that both their joy and grief are temporary. We can have sympathetic joy for the birth of their child, while also understanding that their happiness is reliant upon attachment to what is ultimately an impermanent illusion, that this attachment will eventually turn to grief, and that out of attachment they will act selfishly and foolishly in ways that do not bring them to liberation, but perpetuate their own suffering. We can empathize with their anger about losing their job, while also understanding the causes they are creating by harboring anger in their mind, and understanding that the root of that anger is the belief in self-nature being inherently real. On a relative level, we can empathize with their interpretation of their experience, but on an ultimate level, we should be empathizing with their experience as a sentient being whose delusion and ignorance are keeping them trapped in a cycle of suffering for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We're empathizing with the condition of their minds and the contents therein. The anger, pride, jealousy, selfishness, hatred, and ignorance. The ego that lies at the root of these poisons, and the results that will come from their poisoned thoughts, words, and actions. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about empathizing with the conditions of other beings' minds. Wrapped up in our self-absorption and self-cherishing, as we usually are, we are unable to relate to the situation of others like this. When we are unable to relate to others, we find ourselves able to entertain hostility, anger, jealousy, pride, greed, all of those things that are really detrimental to us. We are able to maintain these negative habitual tendencies, and we don't even see them. We don't even notice them. We're stuck in the echo chamber of our own ego. So we have to hold up a mirror to ourselves and see what's really going on. What is the condition of our own mind? These ego-driven habitual tendencies are like room temperature air. It's there, it's present, we're literally breathing in this stuff over and over again all day long, and yet we don't notice it. We don't think about it. Even when we're trying to be kind, that ego, undermines our kindness even. Even when we're trying to be kind, we wind up thinking about ourselves. When we look at our kindness with real self-honesty, we often find that it's all about us. It usually has very little to do with anyone else. This is an unpleasant truth to face, but we must face it in order to discover what the Buddha really meant when he spoke of kindness toward all sentient beings. If I asked you if you were basically a kind person, most of you would likely say yes. But if I ask you how much time you actually spend over the course of any given day, but actually doing something for others from a place of true compassion, keeping bodhicitta or compassion alive in your mind, you'd be shocked. We tend to generalize our memories of our day. Our memories of the day are just a series of the most notable events, right? I worked, I went to the store, I walked the dog, I made dinner, I talked to a friend. The end. That was the day. Maybe you break it down more. When I was at work, I answered these emails, I had these meetings, I answered more emails, I had these phone calls, I worked on this project or that project. That was my work day. If we think of our day as basically 5 or 10 activities, and a few of them are kind things, walking the dog, making dinner for your family, a warm conversation with a friend, well, that's 3 out of 5. That's pretty good, right? It's not so bad. Those 5 activities took up how many hours of your 24-hour day? What were you doing the rest of the time? And just thinking of those actions that you would classify as kind, did you actually show up with a heart of true kindness? When you were making dinner for your family, were you keeping the bodhicitta alive? Or were you daydreaming? Or were you angrily ruminating about your day? Or were you practicing attachment to your own family and the joy that they bring you? Were you focusing on hopes or fears? When you were walking the dog, were you keeping the bodhicitta alive? Or were you impatient and frustrated, jerking the leash and wishing you didn't have to stand out in the rain waiting for this being to poop? If we are courageous enough to examine ourselves honestly, we will be shocked at how little time we actually spend aware of the needs and unfulfilled desires of others. If we had one of those old time cards, where you punch in and punch out, where you could really see at the end of the day how much time you had spent on bodhicitta and how much time you were off the clock goofing off, you'd be shocked. You'd never be able to live on that paycheck. Of course, when we die, we're going to have to. That's when our rent comes due. And we discover that the karma for this life has run out, so we need a down payment on a new place, a new body. If you've been diligently maintaining the bodhicitta, you'll have accumulated a wealth of merit that allows you to take an auspicious rebirth in which you can continue practicing compassion toward awakening, towards the end of suffering. But if you've slacked off and you're totally broke, you'll move to a bad neighborhood. You'll take a disadvantageous rebirth where you will suffer greatly. And overwhelmed by your experience of suffering, it will be nearly impossible for you to do anything but create more suffering for yourself and others. So anyways, the bad news is we're not as kind as we think we are. The good news is that this doesn't mean we're bad people, only that we have bad habits. And habits can be changed. Jetsuma says, it's sometimes really helpful to make a purposeful and directed effort, such as actually clocking in when you are aware of the needs and desires of other people, and when you actively participate in trying to help in some way. The help can take different forms. Sometimes the things that people want around aren't really good for them to have. I mean, you have a teenage son that wants nothing better than a very fast car, and you know that's not quite right for him. So you don't always give a person what they want, but you can certainly empathize. You can certainly be there in a very kind and profound way as a force for connection, for communication in someone else's life. We spend very little time doing that, being there for someone in a kind and profound way. Instead, we spend most of our time thinking about ourselves and our own problems and our own ideas. We're so fixated on ourselves. It's like Bette Midler says in Beaches, but enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? We often want to be kind simply because we seek approval from others. We want people to like us. We want our parents to be proud. We want to get love. We'll do anything we can. We'll lie, cheat, steal, put on, act, pretend, mask our true feelings. We'll do anything we can just to get a bit of approval. On the surface, it may look good, but all that you're doing is further solidifying that habit of grasping and that habit of ego. We tend to think we've been kind. We've already done it. It's happening. We're generally kind people. It's just who we are. But we don't realize that our kindness is not actually going out in the world. I think, in my spare time, I like writing poetry, and something that in the writing world, there's often this advice that, people get down on themselves. They're like, I'm so bad at writing. I'm really bad. I'm not really a writer. I've never been published. I'm not really a writer. And everything I've written sucks. And I've always liked the belief that if you write, you're a writer. If you sing, you're a singer. If you dance, you're a dancer. If you do the action, you are that thing. Being a writer doesn't mean you have to be Stephen King. You just have to write. If you write, you're a writer. A writer is someone who writes. So, in the same way, if we're going to be kind people, we have to be people that actually do kind things in the world. Our kindness has to actually go out into the world. We can't just think about it in our heads. It's we have to actually do something. So I want to take a couple minutes to do a little exercise together. I want you to go grab something to write with. If all you have is your phone, you can use that. You're clearly on a device watching this right now. So if you're on a computer, you can use your computer. But I really do think that pen and paper is better. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds to go grab something to write with. Okay? 60 seconds on the clock. Go. Grab a pen and paper. Got 45 seconds. $30 seconds. And take advantage of this time to drink some tea. 20 seconds. Anything you can write with. Crayons are fine. Markers are fine. Pen or pencil. 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down everything that we have actually done today to bring kindness into the world. I want you to write the entire time. Don't stop and think, just write. Just keep the pen moving. Really dig in. What was your first thought upon waking? Did you think of others or did you think of yourself? If you pray before you eat, maybe you write that down. Did you actually pray with compassion or did you just blah, blah, blah with your mouth? Dig in there and investigate. What have you actually done today to bring kindness into the world? Just for 3 minutes. So what have you done today? Start at the beginning. Just keep writing. Don't worry about your handwriting. Just keep writing. For some things, you may have had a mixed motivation, partially about yourself, partially about others. Just be honest about it. Okay. So what do you think? Have you been kind today? Do you think you're kind enough? Or do you think there's some room for improvement? I've read that the Dalai Lama has recommended reflecting like this before bed each night. Before bed, you can reflect on what you did well and dedicate the merit of that to all sentient beings. And then you can reflect on what you didn't do well. You know, what made you angry? Where did you lose your patience? When were you greedy? And you can confess those failures and maybe say Vajrasattva's mantra, if you know that, Om Benzer Sato Hong. You can say that mantra to purify the karma of your misdeeds and then commit to doing better the next day. You know, today anger really got the best of me. Tomorrow, I'm going to be extra careful not to let myself fall into anger. So you can use that process of reflection to improve your behavior and your kindness. So with this idea of journaling, the kindness that we do, this actually came from one of Jetsuma's teachings. And she says that sometimes that can be just a really helpful way to, to face yourself, to actually hold up a mirror and check. We think we're kind people, but what did I actually do? Did I actually do anything kind today? Just because you did something kind last week doesn't mean you're kind today. Jetsuma says, self-examination often leads us to the decision to be a kind person. When your decision is about being a kind person, however, there's actually very little true caring for the welfare of sentient beings. What you are really trying to do is to find yourself, or to like yourself, or to label yourself, to discriminate between self and other, and to continue the continuum of egocentricity. When a person decides to be kind, they do so because they want to be a certain way, or they want to present themselves a certain way, but generally it's all about them. The Buddha teaches us that when we wish to embody the virtue of compassion, when we actually decide to be kind, we should do so for very logical reasons. First, we should study cyclic existence, the cycle of death and rebirth, well enough to see its faults. One of the main faults of cyclic existence is that everyone who is born will die. Even worse, during the entire time that you're alive, at least until you start to age or you get really sick, you forget that simple fact, so you don't act appropriately. Every single one of us is going to experience death. Intellectually, we know this, but we don't act like we know it. The way that we think and act and prioritize demonstrates that we have forgotten that we will die. Because the other thing that we should understand about death is that when you die, you can't take anything with you. Not a single thing, except the habitual tendency or karma or condition of your own mind. That's it. That's all you have. That's your only possession. It's the only thing that you get to bring into your next life. And this also, I think we understand intellectually. We don't act like we understand it. We can't take anything with us at death, and yet we spend our lives trying to accumulate material goods for no other reason than that we want them. We treat our material gain as a marker of success, forgetting that we can't take any of it with us, forgetting that none of these things will help us when we die. In cyclic existence, we also suffer from the suffering of suffering. If we had a different kind of mind, like the lamas who have tamed their minds, we would see birth and death, and our minds would be stable and spacious. When you meet someone with some accomplishment who has a mind like this, a stable and spacious mind, you'll notice that events don't bother them so much. Experiences kind of roll off them like water off a duck's back. Jetsuma says, unfortunately, everything bothers us. Everything is something we react toward because it is the nature of our mind to react toward everything with acceptance or rejection, hope and fear. What must come from that is hatred, greed, and ignorance. We either hate something, or we want it, or we ignore it. Thus, we engage in the suffering of suffering. We not only experience death, we suffer because of our reaction to death. We not only experience separation, we suffer because of our reaction to separation. So these are the faults of cyclic existence, and what else would you do other than practice a path that leads to the cessation of suffering? You could accumulate material goods, but what good will that do? Or you could continue the habit of being hateful. What good would that do? Or you could continue to grasp. What good would that do? The Buddha has taught that there is an end to suffering. In order to end our suffering, we must exit cyclic existence. Cyclic existence means that one actually creates the karma of suffering and death, the endless cycle of death and rebirth that we find ourselves in. To exit cyclic existence, we must achieve liberation or enlightenment. The building blocks of death and rebirth are based on the assumption of self-nature being inherently real and the reaction to phenomenal experience. When we remove these building blocks and awaken to the enlightened state, we will no longer revolve in cyclic existence. We'll exit that cycle of death and rebirth, suffering lifetime after lifetime. The Buddha has taught that we can awaken to the enlightened state through the systemic pacification of hatred, greed, and ignorance. The pacification of desire through meditation, prayer, contemplation, study, through pursuing enlightened activity. Through these activities, all of the perceptual experience of our karma is pacified, such that we finally awaken to the primordial wisdom nature. And that is the end of suffering. When we truly can see the primordial wisdom nature, when that is our view. Jetsma says, so if you become a spiritual person in order to be something, you're still clinging to ego. And you'll actually never attain enlightenment by awakening to the primordial wisdom nature. So, as the Buddha said, we need to use like the Buddha's logic in order to motivate ourselves to do this. We need to contemplate the faults of cyclic existence. We need to contemplate this experience that we're trapped in, this experience of death and rebirth and suffering lifetime after lifetime, and understand that, and understand what goes into that, what creates that, and what gets us out of it. How do we open the exit door? We really have to understand the faults of existence, the faults of cyclic existence well enough, though, to actually have it motivate us. It's like if you are in a burning house, if you don't understand that the house is on fire, you're not going to leave it. You have to understand that the house is on fire. So we are going to meditate right now. We're going to close with a brief contemplation or analytical meditation to help us understand this better. Because understanding that the house is on fire that is the fire that will fuel us on the spiritual path. It is the fire that will keep us focused in our meditations. It is what, that urgency of exiting a house that's on fire. We need to have that in order to diligently work towards liberation, not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. We need to understand that it's not just us that are stuck in this cycle. It is all sentient beings. All of our brothers and sisters are stuck in this cycle too, and they don't know how to get out. That's what's really sad. They don't know how to get out. So we have this opportunity to learn how to get out, but we have to be properly motivated in order to actually pick up the books, pick up the tools, and do the work that needs to be done to open that exit door, not only for ourselves, but for others. So we're going to close today with a brief contemplation or analytical meditation. Analytical meditation works with the mind's natural quality of movement and helps us to change our deeply ingrained thought patterns. We're going to alternate periods of contemplation with periods of rest. During the contemplation, keep your mind gently focused on the topic. Kind of how when we meditated earlier today, we kept our minds gently focused on our breath. During this contemplation, we'll keep our minds gently focused on the topic at hand. We're going to be contemplating the faults of cyclic existence. We're going to alternate that with resting our mind. And when we rest our mind, just leave it alone. Just let it be. Resting the mind in a non-conceptual state cuts the mind's attachment to concepts, its habit of always thinking of the past or future, likes and dislikes. All of that thinking is like constantly stirring the water in a muddy pond, never letting it settle and clarify. By allowing the mind to relax into its natural state, we work with the mind's self-seeing or self-knowing quality. So by alternating these methods, we work with both the mind's natural quality of movement and the mind's natural self-knowing quality. Chagdog Tuku says, when we alternate these two methods, slowly and subtly, our perspective begins to change. What starts as intellectual understanding gradually becomes more personal and experiential. Contemplation is pretty self-explanatory, but resting the mind probably needs a little explanation. Allowing the mind to rest is an effortless process that reveals an indwelling awareness, an awareness that is non-dual, not a subjective awareness of an object. Usually when people meditate, they try to do something. But instead of trying to do something, we're just going to let the mind relax. Don't block it. Don't follow it. Just let it be. We are allowing our mind to rest in the spontaneously open space in which thoughts arise and subside. In that space, all sorts of thoughts about the past or future will naturally occur. That is the space in which they occur, so it will happen. But don't grasp at them, or follow them, or suppress them, or push them away. Just let it be. That is just the nature of the water. It's perfectly fine. Just let it be. Just rest. So the way that this alternating meditation goes is that you start contemplating, and then when your mind feels full of concepts, stagnant, no longer fresh, you drop the contemplation and you relax the mind. You do nothing. You allow your mind to relax only as long as it remains truly restful. When you notice that you've become distracted and you've begun to lose your meditation to thought, then you move on to the next analytical meditation. When that gets stagnant, you relax the mind. When it's no longer truly restful, you go to the next one, and so on. So since we're meditating all together, I'm going to use a timer at preset intervals, and I'll let you know what we're doing at each point along the way. But if you practice by yourself, you can determine when it is time to move to the next step by watching your mind and being aware of when it becomes active or stagnant. Today, we're going to contemplate the faults of cyclic existence. That is, the suffering of change, of death and impermanence. The fact that we're all going to die. Everyone's going to die. Everyone you know is going to die. You're going to die. Everything's impermanent. Everything that's upsetting you now is impermanent. Everything that you love is impermanent. Everything you have in your house is impermanent. Everything you want to shop for online is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. Also, this is the suffering of suffering. The fact that we not only suffer from death, but our reaction to death. We suffer from separation and our reaction to separation. We suffer from impermanence and our reaction to impermanence. And the pervasiveness of suffering. Even if we are comfortable in this brief moment, we still have the potential for suffering. We've been born into bodies that are susceptible to pain, starvation, injury, and illness. Our existence is such that when we encounter any difficulty, we experience suffering. Just like how if you squeeze a sesame seed the oil will come out. When we are squeezed, suffering comes out. That's the oil of our experience. And this suffering pervades the experience of all sentient beings, rich or poor, ugly or beautiful, Instagram influencer or anonymous nobody. Everybody experiences suffering. And that the only way out of this suffering is to attain enlightenment. So we're going to contemplate this. This will take about 10 minutes. Just got to find my timer here. Which app is it? Here we go. So you can take the same meditation posture that you did at the beginning. Sit up straight, gently relaxed. Okay, so we're going to start by contemplating the faults of cyclic existence, suffering of death and impermanence, the suffering of suffering, pervasiveness of suffering, that the only way out is enlightenment. Now let the mind rest. generate compassion in relation to your contemplation. Let the mind rest. Now consider a commitment that you feel ready to make in relation to your contemplation. Now let the mind rest again. Now formulate a prayer in relation to your contemplation. And let the mind rest. And always, at the end of your contemplation, remember to dedicate the merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we'll do that now. The dedication prayer is on the last page of the opening prayers document. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.